The champagne cork popped, but it didn't sound like victory. It sounded like a starter pistol at a firing squad. Our CEO raised a flimsy glass of Prosecco, smiling too wide, and declared, "To growth, to evolution, to trimming the fat." The room clapped on cue, but the cheer was hollow. Everyone knew some of us were about to become that fat. Conference room was jammed with employees shoulder to shoulder, pretending this was a party. Plastic trays of sandwiches sweated under the lights, the soda was flat, and the cupcakes had already been picked clean. Nobody felt celebratory. It was survival mode, smile, nod, and hope your name wasn't next. Then Bryce appeared. The new vice president of operational efficiency. Title alone was a warning shot. He walked in like a model auditioning for a toothpaste ad. Slick hair, blinding teeth, dead eyes. The kind of man who'd cut his own mother if it bumped margins by a fraction. The CEO clapped him on the back like he was the savior we'd all been waiting for. I'd been here 15 years. Through mergers, lawsuits, cybersecurity fires, and CEOs who talked about transformation while barely keeping the lights on. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't political. I was the quiet one, the one who kept the paperwork straight, the one who understood the fine print nobody else had patience to read. Invisible until the foundation cracked. As Bryce preached about efficiency and evolution, I didn't clap. I didn't fake a smile. I just stared at my plastic cup of soda and thought about a single line buried in a licensing agreement from 2012. A line nobody in that room remembered. But I did. And soon they were going to wish they had too. Bryce didn't waste time playing nice. The moment the CEO's toast faded, he stepped forward like the headliner everyone came to see. "We're not here to maintain tradition," he said, his voice sharp enough to cut through the stale air. "We're here to optimize, to evolve, to remove inefficiencies." The words were corporate poetry, the kind that looks good on a slide deck but tastes like poison when spoken out loud. Around me, people clapped again, but the sound was brittle. Some stared at the floor. Others laughed too hard, desperate to look safe. It was the kind of fear you could smell, sweaty palms gripping plastic cups, fake smiles stretched until they hurt. Bryce's gaze moved slowly across the room, as if he were already tagging names for the chopping block. His laminated smile never cracked, but his eyes did the work of a guillotine. When he spoke about streamlining operations, I could practically hear the sound of cardboard boxes being folded in the HR office. I knew this speech wasn't for us. It was for the board, for investors, for the people counting margins and dividends. We were just the backdrop, the legacy employees who'd soon be reduced to a line item in a quarterly report. 15 years in this company had taught me to read between the lines. Party wasn't a celebration. It was a soft launch of mass execution. I didn't clap. I didn't laugh. I just took another sip of flat soda and reminded myself of something everyone else had forgotten. Buried deep in our licensing paperwork was a clause with my name on it. A clause that didn't care about Bryce's haircut or the CEO's toast. They thought they were cutting fat. They didn't realize they were holding a knife to their own throat. The Slack ping came at 2:46 p.m. A plain message. "Please report to room C412 at 3:30. My stomach sank. That room used to host birthday cupcakes and baby showers. Now it was the execution chamber. When I walked in, the air was stale, the blinds drawn too tight. Bryce sat at the head of the table like a smug scarecrow in an overpriced suit, arms folded, that laminated smile plastered across his face. To his right sat Melissa from HR, avoiding eye contact like I was radioactive. "Take a seat," Bryce said, as if we were about to discuss weekend plans, not amputate 15 years of my life. Melissa slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were the papers, termination acknowledgement, NDA reiterations, non-compete clauses. All the usual boilerplate, printed crisp and clean like tombstones. "Thanks for your years of service," Bryce droned, eyes glued to the folder instead of me. "But with the merger, we're streamlining operations, reducing legacy inefficiencies. You understand. Legacy inefficiencies. That was me. 15 years reduced to a line item. I signed where they pointed except one line near the bottom. A new clause. Compliance Officer Clearance Certification Acknowledgement. They didn't even know what it meant, or who that line was for. I left it blank. Melissa didn't press. Just slapped a sticky note, follow up, and tucked the file away like it might bite her. When it was over, she handed me the cardboard box waiting by the door. My pens, my cactus, my novelty shark stapler. 15 years of late nights and broken deadlines, all reduced to office junk. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just looked at Bryce, gave him a thumbs up sharp enough to curdle milk, and walked out. He thought I was finished. He hadn't read the fine print. They thought they were done with me the moment I handed over my badge. What none of them realized was that buried in the company's foundation was a time bomb with my name stamped all over it. Flashback 2012. A cramped war room filled with lawyers, the CTO, and a younger CEO pacing like a caged animal. The problem? Expanding into restricted international markets required clearance under Regulation 43F. None of the executives had the security vetting. Company was stalled. I have clearance, I said, sipping cold coffee that tasted like mud. Level 4. Valid through 2020. The room went still. The general counsel frowned. That's a heavy responsibility. I shrugged. 6 months of waiting or one signature from me. It's your call. Within hours, my name was written into the paperwork as the anchor for our international licenses. Not the CEO's. Not the CTO's. Mine. The time it felt like loyalty. A shortcut to keep the company alive. I didn't think twice. Neither did they. Clause slid into the final draft, tucked neatly on page 12 of a 20-page agreement that no one ever bothered to revisit. Fast forward 10 years. They forgot. I didn't. And when Melissa pushed that termination folder toward me, the line they expected me to sign wasn't just legal filler, it was the trigger. Compliance Officer Clearance Certification. That was me. Without my signature, the system wouldn't recognize a valid handover. So I left it blank. They thought they'd trimmed the fat. What they'd really done was pull the pin. And once HR clicked termination complete, the grenade was already rolling across the boardroom floor. The first ping came from Singapore just after midnight GMT. A junior analyst flagged it in the daily report, unable to access Compliance Suite. Credentials rejected. First, everyone assumed it was a VPN hiccup or a regional server burp. These things happened all the time. But then Tokyo chimed in. Zurich. Cape Town. Each with the same message, access denied. By sunrise in New York, the inbox was a minefield of red flags. An IT manager fired off an urgent email, attaching screenshots of spinning login wheels and rejection codes. Legal replied with a shrug, claiming it was probably technical. Risk bounced it back with a passive-aggressive emoji. Nobody wanted to be the first to say the word systemic. The 10 a.m. operations meeting, someone finally raised it. Multiple offices can't access restricted data pools. Bryce barely looked up from his cucumber water. Probably just a compliance burp, he said, smirking like he'd cracked a joke. The CFO forced a chuckle. A few managers echoed it nervously, as if laughter could put the fire out. But beneath the jokes, panic was creeping in. The dashboards were bleeding yellow, some flipping to red. One of the attorneys whispered, "If those licenses lapse, contracts default immediately." Her voice was swallowed by the room's forced optimism. Bryce waved a hand. "Let IT sort it out. Worst case, we reboot the servers." The CTO's jaw tightened. Everyone else missed it, but I'd seen that look before, years ago when the system almost collapsed under a cyber attack. It wasn't the face of a man dealing with a glitch. It was the face of a man watching a fuse burn. And the fuse had just reached the dynamite. At exactly midnight GMT, the system did what it was programmed to do: obey. One quiet chime in the server logs, then a chain reaction no one could stop. Singapore went dark first. Licenses revoked, systems locked, red alerts spreading across dashboards like spilled ink. Within minutes, Tokyo followed. Zurich. Johannesburg. Dubai. One by one, every international office blinked from authorized to suspended to critical. Cascade was merciless. This wasn't a software bug or a server crash. It was the licensing core doing its job, stripping access the moment my HR status changed from active to terminated. Regulation 43F wasn't forgiving. Didn't negotiate. Just revoked. By the time New York woke up, overseas directors were already panicking. Phones buzzed, inboxes filled with frantic messages. Why can't we access client data? Our quarterly check-in failed. Local regulators flagged us as non-compliant. In the boardroom, executives stared at the live dashboard as if it were a hospital monitor flatlining in real time. Each license flipping red was another artery severed. The silence was thick, punctured only by the relentless ping of alerts. Meanwhile, in Sedona, I was barefoot on a rental porch, tea in hand, the desert sky opening up in shades of molten gold. My phone was in airplane mode, buried under a smooth rock. The world behind me was bleeding out, and I was breathing easier than I had in years. 'Cause Bryce thought he'd cut fat. What he really did was yank out the keystone. And now the whole building was collapsing, floor by floor, in every time zone at once. By mid-morning, the boardroom looked less like a place of strategy and more like a bunker under siege. Starbucks cups littered the mahogany table, half spilled onto financial reports. Assistants darted in and out with iPads, whispering updates that made the air colder with every passing minute. The CTO projected the compliance dashboard onto the wall. Every international license was red. Not yellow, not pending, revoked. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, the general counsel spoke, her voice tight. Per Regulation 43F, these licenses were tied to one clearance officer. Her clearance. She didn't have to say my name. Everyone knew. The CFO slammed a palm on the table. You mean to tell me we built a $355 million merger on a single point of failure? Eyes turned toward Bryce. He tried to recover, muttering about redundancies and IT backups. But when the CTO swiveled his laptop around, the truth was brutal. No backup existed. TAR termination flagged the system as invalid. The licenses are gone. The CEO leaned back in his chair, face pale, jaw locked. Then he flipped to page 47 of the merger contract and read aloud, each word like a death knell. Clause 12C. Termination of the named clearance officer shall result in immediate nullification of all international licenses. Without appeal. The room froze. Bryce stammered, "We can fix this. Call her back. Offer her a reinstatement, a bonus." Security entered quietly, two men in dark suits. One extended a hand. "Sir, your badge." Bryce blinked, confused. "Wait. What?" "You're terminated," the board chair said coldly. "Effective immediately." The shredders were as his badge was destroyed sounded like a guillotine. And just like that, the efficiency messiah became the face of corporate ruin. While the boardroom in New York dissolved into chaos, Sedona was silent. I sat on the porch of a stucco rental, barefoot, a mug of chamomile tea warming my hands. The desert sun poured across the red rocks like molten glass, and for the first time in years, my breathing felt steady. On the table beside me, my phone lay face down beneath a smooth stone. Airplane mode. No buzzing, no calls, no desperate emails begging for help. The world I had left behind was unraveling in real time, and I chose not to watch. It wasn't gloating. I didn't need to dance on the ashes. This wasn't revenge, it was clarity. For 15 years, I had carried the invisible weight of compliance, the kind of responsibility no one notices until it breaks. I had warned them. I had sent the memos. I had raised the red flags. They ignored everyone. Now, as their dashboards bled red and their lawyers scrambled to explain the unexplainable, I simply sipped my tea. The silence here was louder than any fire alarm. My lawyer's text came once, short and precise. Settlement incoming. Generous. NDA attached. The kind of message that would have sent my old colleagues into a frenzy of relief. For me, it was just confirmation of what I already knew. The system had worked exactly as designed. In the canyon below, the wind shifted, carrying dust across the horizon. Somewhere back east, Bryce was being escorted out by security, his laminated smile shredded with his badge. Here, there was only stillness, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the moment they cut me loose, they cut their own throat. By the end of that week, the company's empire had collapsed into rubble. International contracts dissolved overnight. Regulators froze accounts. Partners threatened lawsuits. The stock plummeted 12% in a single afternoon, dragging every executive's bonus down with it. Inside the Manhattan headquarters, the atmosphere turned funereal. Hallways once buzzing with forced cheer were now filled with lawyers clutching binders, assistants carrying boxes, and managers whispering like mourners. The $355 million merger, once toasted as a triumph, was being dissected as corporate malpractice. The CEO tried to hold the line, barking at legal and risk for answers, but nothing could be undone. Clause 12C wasn't a suggestion. It was law. Without my clearance, the licenses were gone and no negotiation could resurrect them. Bryce became the scapegoat, fired mid-meeting, his badge shredded like the trust he'd promised to deliver. But the truth was bigger. The company had ignored every warning, dismissed every quiet voice, and built their future on arrogance. Meanwhile, in Sedona, I sat beneath a wide-brimmed hat, laptop open on the patio. An email from my lawyer landed. They blinked. Settlement incoming. Terms generous. NDA optional. Another message followed minutes later from a boutique consulting firm. Partnership proposal, global risk strategy. I smiled, not out of spite, but out of relief. 15 years of loyalty, dismissed in a single meeting, had finally been given meaning. My silence had spoken louder than any confrontation ever could. Company wanted to trim the fat. Instead, they severed their own artery. And me? I walked away whole, lighter, freer, and finally seen.